I don't want to replay the same mistakes over and over again. Like, I'm good. Like, if you say tequila makes me a little nutty, I'm going to stop drinking tequila. Like, we're not going to play that out.
We've only sort of named it as we've become clinicians. We were the containers in the mirror for each other. And, I believed what I was seeing in the mirror, that she's always sort of through the reflection of healthy love, asked me to be in this moment a better version of myself. And the key piece has been we've listened. Because there's a part of me here that is not designed for connection. There's a part of me here that is designed for protection, that doesn't include love and doesn't include that maybe they're the smartest person in the room, maybe they have my best interest at heart.
I'd like to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring Real Love Ready. Whatever brought you here today, whether it's love, loss, or you're just trying to understand yourself better, I want you to know you don't have to figure it out alone. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist online on your schedule. Check them out at betterhelp.com/loveready for 10% off. That's BetterHelp.com/loveready. Hello, our beautiful community, and welcome to this episode of Real Love Ready. Sometimes the thing that helped us survive becomes the very thing that keeps us from the love we want. My guests today, Ashley and Lair Torrent, both came to this work through painful early experiences that shaped how they understood safety, intimacy, survival, and connection. And together, they have spent years exploring what happens when those early wounds follow us into adult relationships. Ashley is a psycho-spiritual counselor, intuitive medium, and spiritual guide. Lair is a licensed therapist and the author of The Practice of Love. Together, they co-host the Practice of Love podcast. Today, we're going to talk about what it really looks like to stay connected when things get hard. And boy, does it ever, right? It's life. Life can be very hard. Ashley and Lair share how their early experiences shaped the ways they learned to protect themselves, and how those patterns can still surface in their relationship today. Together, we explore what it looks like to keep choosing connection when old wounds get activated, and why love is not just a feeling, but a practice we return to again and again. Today, I am joined by my dear friends, two people that I love dearly, and I mean that very sincerely, you two. And I'm so grateful for our time together today. You gave me your hour. And, I've learned a lot from both of you. You recently, Ashley, and Lair over the years. We've worked together quite a few times now. I loved your book, The Practice of Love. And you're two people that I know are walking the walk. And when it comes to our community and the people that we're bringing in to teach us and to model what it means to walk with love, you're two of the best. So you're two individuals that have been doing the work and practicing it in your day-to-day life, in your marriage and your family and in your work with other people. I just want to say a huge thank you to you. And I treasure this time and treasure you both.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I thought we would start our discussion today with your origin stories, because our origin stories are very, very important. How we learn to love. And we all, I wrote about this in my book on just like how important it is for us to go back to our childhoods and see how love was taught to us, how it was modeled. Because it really does, of course, shape who we are in our adult relationships, right? How we show up. So I would love to ask both of you, what was each of your earliest memories of love?
You want me to go?
Sure.
For me, love wasn't safe and there were no boundaries. And I was only lovable as if I was in service to making everyone feel good, So in order to survive that, I learned to make sure everyone was okay. And I also had to disassociate from my whole childhood, like leave my body, be disconnected from myself. Because the adults around me were pretty volatile and not self-aware people.
So Ashley, what did that look like like when you were little? Can you give us some examples of how safety was not present, boundaries were non-existent in many ways, and how you became the caretaker of the environment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it came in all forms of abuse, physical, sexual, emotional, psychological. The rules were always changing. My body wasn't my own. And then when I wasn't the focus of abuse, the adults who needed comfort or care, needed me to be in the room with them and care for them emotionally. So there wasn't a lot of, and the rules were always changing and the needs were always changing. So it was like on every day, you didn't know what the rules were going to be. You're kind of walking on eggshells all the time. So that's when I say a lack of safety it was just very volatile and very intrusive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then you also had when the adults were occupied, you were completely alone. So you were the focus of all the stuff, or isolated, right? And then you just didn't know when you were going to become the focus again. So it was just constantly like that.
And I imagine that really built, like empathy came to mind, because it's like you're always reading the energy, reading the room.
Always.
How do I need to be right now? Like it's like walking on eggshells, right? And then it's like you have these roles that you have to play. Like it's like, all right, am I the soft one right now, or am I the protector? Am I like, and you mentioned dissociation, because I want to go into this a little bit. What does that mean? Like to dissociate? Does it mean like you didn't know you were doing it? When you're little, you're not aware, right? But you would just like, okay, I can't be here right now. And your protection as a child is to leave.
Right. I think it's such a brilliant coping mechanism, as much as like it to change it as an adult, but for children to not be able to be in the space they're in, to not be safe in their bodies, their environment, like it's kind of brilliant what the brain does. It splits. And so I like imagine that you energetically leave your body. Like I kind of, I refer to it as like floating in the trees, becoming an observer of your life, but you're not physically, emotionally, spiritually connected to self. And, children can't survive a life that's out of control. So their best coping mechanism is to leave and basically become a shell of themselves. I remember after I left home, walking around New York City when I lived there and just feeling like I was so disembodied, just feeling like I was this tiny spirit in this body that and I used to be like accident prone because I had no sense of body. And then you do build, I think I was just naturally a sensitive and empathetic person, but that becomes like your superpower, where you're like, you can tell by the way the car door shuts, by the footsteps that are coming in the house, you know, by everything, the smells, the look in the eye, like what kind of day it's going to be. And as a practitioner, that's amazing for my clients. As Lair always says, I've monetized my trauma into a superpower. Wow. But as a child, you always are on, like you never are off.
I always say that that's what's helped you as a medium too. You've become so finely tuned to everything. Let me just say this. I can't mow down a row of Oreos without her knowing about it in the middle of it.
It's so funny, Lair.
It's true though. Yeah.
You're like a detective. Everything is everything, the smell, the something
I'm
left.
Very detailed. Like I notice everything.
What does that mean?
What about you, Lair? What was your earliest memory of love?
So my mom was 15 when she had me, and they kicked her out of school because that's what they did with girls back then when they got pregnant.
She was in grade 10?
I believe. No. What is that?
Yeah, that
15. That's 10.
Grade 10. Wow.
Yeah, kicked her out. And I remember it was abject poverty. Abject poverty. I always say that living in the house was like Little House on the Prairie. It was no heat, no running water, no electricity. And so that type of socioeconomic impairment bred something within me that I think is bred in within a lot of children, either the eldest child or if it's the only child, like in my case, you recognize that mom's already stressed enough as it is. Like you don't want to have any inconvenient feelings.
Nope.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to be inconvenient. You want to be. So I got a lot of praise for being a good boy. And that version still lives. And on the other side of that, I got a lot of praise also because, and we find this with eldest children and with only children, you become the emotional confidant of the parent. And so you get a lot of accolades and praise and love for showing up in that regard. And I turned that into like my relational dating style, right? Like I was I loved riding in on the white horse. Right? I loved saving the damsels.
You're the hero. You're the savior.
Yeah. But that also, there's no vulnerability in that. There's no real feeling.
Oh yeah.
And so you end up either, it's Brene Brown who said this, so I'll credit her, but like you end up running with people who would rather you, my mother included, die upon that white horse than fall off. And so you stayed there.
Wow.
Until I met her, that is.
So Lair, when you were little, 15, you were raised by a child, but you weren't raised, right? It's like you had to be, what was it like? Were you like trying to be her partner, but also the good boy? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I could be the support. I could be the man. I'm the man of the house,
Well, I'll tell you a quick little story. It was my 7th birthday. And she would save for Christmas and she would save all she could for birthday so that I would have some sort of normalcy around those things. And I remember I found her crying at the kitchen table, and she said, Lair, I tried to parcel out the money as best I could. I got you the present that you asked for. I got you the cake and the ice cream, but I couldn't afford candles. And I went through all of the things that she had done, down to the wrapping and the tape and I named all of those things because I was trying to not be sad about the fact that I didn't get birthday candles. I didn't want her to be sad that I had birthday candle.
Right. But do you remember, were you sad?
It's interesting because I drive Ashley crazy. I don't have feelings around my birthday. It drives her crazy. She's like, this soul has incarnated in this body to be here at this time with us and with me on this day. And I'm like, a shirt would be good, I guess. Yeah. And I don't have, so what I realized I had done is, in order to, and I'm going to be sure this has happened in other areas of my life, in order to not be inconvenient, I cauterized those feelings. It was easier to not have.
Cauterize them. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I cauterized.
Cut them off at the burn the feelings. They don't exist.
So I like the fact that she likes my birthday as an example, and my kids and all that, but I'm still like, I can't find it. And that's just, it sounds like a silly example, but I
don't think it's silly at all. That's a big example.
It is.
Significant.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up without a father too, right, Lair? So your mom had, okay. How did that absence shape the way you understood yourself and later the way you showed up in intimate relationships? There's a lot of people that don't have a dad, right?
Yeah. And, we know all of the statistics about, 95% of the inmate population in prisons is fatherless homes and all of that. So I think it was I became sort of the man of the house to some degree, in the regard that, like, I was always the good boy. I tried not to do anything wrong. I didn't want to make anything too difficult for her. I tried to take care of her, especially I remember taking care of her when she was sick. I was sort of doing things that were sort of outside of my pay grade and outside of my maturity level, as a kid, to sort of show up for this person. But, it also did teach me to show up for another human being. And I think that, Ash has had a recent bout of not feeling particularly good. And she was so thankful of how I showed up in that space. But that's what I do. And again, I've monetized my wounding and how I show up for my clients.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I ended up having a stepfather for a good period of my teens, but that was a mixed bag of not great, where love was again predicated on external validation of like, you were only as good as your last sporting event. In my case, it was hockey, which is, you guys know well up there in Canada. And yeah, I was only as good as my last hockey game. And I would try to gain his love and affection through that sport.
But also not being able to learn how to feel, would you say?
Yeah.
Or demonstrate your feelings?
Oh, that didn't happen. No, not from him. There was no, men didn't. And, I grew up in the 80s and playing sports in the 80s. And, it was sort of, you really weren't supposed to show those. And if you did, it was a sign. Vulnerability was synonymous with weakness. And so you had I learned a very narrow window of emotionality, right? If you go above the top pane of that window, it's anger and rage, where you become perhaps the pariah of your community or your family, depending on how bad that got. And if you went below this, then perhaps you're not. It's emasculating.
Yeah, the window was pretty tight.
Pretty narrow, yeah.
Wow, pretty narrow. Wow. So do either of you remember the moment that you realized the way I learned to get through life is not the way I want to love?
Yes.
Can you tell us?
Well, for me, I feel like there were a couple of fights that you and I got in when we initially started our relationship. And it's interesting. I'm just realizing now that with Lair, there was a safety I'd never felt with anybody before. So we would have these conversations and I could feel in my body something different was happening with this person. And I'm just recognizing in this moment that the fights we had, the volatility that I was capable of in those fights, I'd never expressed in other relationships because there wasn't any safety. So there were a couple of moments. What'd you say? I was mean. Lucky you. There were a couple of moments. I can't remember what even triggered those moments, but I remember two fights in particular, where I felt so threatened and such a lack of safety in like the dynamic of fighting with someone I love, and also feeling so dissociated and so out of control and feeling like I was always in my body with this person, but in this fight, I'm leaving my body. And then there were times when I drank too much that I would black out rage, but there were times when I was not drinking that I would black out rage. And it was his reflection of what was happening. Like he would say, I don't know who you are right now. Like there was something going on that, and it felt like I was enacting with him what I'd enacted with my mother over and over again. I was becoming with him. He wasn't the perpetrator. Like maybe something in our relationship was triggering, but he wasn't the perpetrator acting the way she was, but I was responding in this huge way that felt so out of control because my fights with her just were like so out of control. And in the deconstructing of those moments, I was like, I don't want to do that to you. I don't want to do this anymore. I really recognized how much I wanted to take responsibility for how I communicated and how present I was, like really needed to land and move slower in those moments. And also just not treat this person the way I had been treated, or he didn't deserve for me to play that out with him because he was not doing that to me, So it was like within the first year, I remember doing that.
Wow.
Like I just didn't want to like react that way. Like that wasn't love to me. That was everything but. Yeah.
Yeah, we started changing the rules.
Yeah, I was going to ask, were you verbal about that, Ash? Like you just said, you said it to yourself, but did you also say it to Lair? Like, I don't want to be this. Like were you able to verbally communicate that?
Well, I think he called me out on it first, which he's always so good at. Like he's so about truth and like naming what's happening, even when it's uncomfortable. But I feel like that's part of the safety is like, okay, you're naming what's happening. And yeah, I remember saying to him, I don't ever want to talk to you like that again. The shame of acting like that. Like I'm one of those people that I don't want to do this again. I don't want to replay the same mistakes over and over again. Like, I'm good. Like, if you say tequila makes me a little nutty, I'm going to stop drinking tequila. Like, we're not going to play that out. Right. Like, I just have always been one of those people that, like,
and you're able to take the feedback.
Yeah. It's not great all the time. I don't always do it in a nice way, but I do.
Yeah.
You're pretty good. Well, I think the one thing that we have done over the years, and even we've only sort of named it as we've become clinicians, and we talked about it in Bloom, is like, we were the containers in the mirror for each other. And, I believed what I was seeing in the mirror. So for me, it wasn't any one like moment. I always say that she's always sort of through the reflection of healthy love, asked me to be in this moment a better version of myself. And the key piece has been we've listened, right? Mm-hmm. We haven't tried to fight to win. We haven't, wanted to stand on that little precipice of ground and keep fighting for what. Instead, we've been able to step back and take that breath and look at. I always say she's perhaps, and I'm usually right, she's perhaps the smartest person in the room right now because I'm so activated. And if I listen to her, and sometimes it's begrudgingly so. We are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but when I start to listen and I start to take responsibility for how I've shown up, then I can see that reflection and I can recognize that, oh, she's just showing me something that I need to know, a piece of the puzzle of me that I need to kind of put in place.
I think you said, there's keywords that are coming up here in this conversation, and they're going to keep happening. But the responsibility piece is really hard for people. The listening and being able to say, okay, this person that I love and I hold so dear is actually telling me something really important for my benefit. Yes. And for our union. Mm-hmm. And the acknowledgement, the admission, you don't have to say it out loud, but okay, I'm in a place of like, ooh, yeah, that wasn't her, it's me, right? Mm-hmm. So the responsibility piece and the accountability piece, a lot of people don't even get that far. And that's like step one.
Well, I think, step one is that mindful awareness that like, oh, wait, maybe I'm showing up in this. And this is kind of how I talk about it in the book, is there's a part of me here that is not designed for connection. There's a part of me here that is designed for protection. It's designed to create distance. I've created a story about this person through this aspect of myself that doesn't include love and doesn't include that maybe they're the smartest person in the room and maybe they have my best interest at heart. Mm-hmm. And so when I stop and I can own at least that, then I can go, okay, maybe I can show up in this place a little bit differently. And
it's an opening.
It's an opening, it's softening. And again, my ego wants to hang on to that and go, oh, I always say it's like a fighter pilot pulling out of a, nosedive for me. But once I start kind of righting the ship, I can go, okay, I titrate that nervous system, recognize that my ego has been activated. There's an aspect of me that fights to win. I don't want to be in that. Anytime I'm fighting to win, that means she loses. If she loses, that means we lose. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. So let's talk about how wounds become patterns and how healing begins. What first put you on the path to healing? And were you already on that path when this became your work? Or did the work itself bring you into deeper healing? Probably true for both, right?
We both. Yeah. I was not in this work when I began healing. I'd been trying to heal in different ways, like seeing different therapists and things at an early age. But the most pivotal moment is I never wanted to become my mother, to be honest. I never wanted to become abusive. And I was living in New York City and I had a dog. And one day my life was pretty stressful and I was just always running around trying to take care of this dog that I shouldn't have had in this apartment. But I was taking her for a walk and she nearly yanked me down the stairs. And I reached up to I was going to hit her. And it was this moment where everything in me froze. And I was like, who am I becoming? I don't hit dogs. I don't hit children. I don't believe in it. Like, animals to be respected. And I was so full of rage. And it was actually my dog, that moment with her, that I was like, I got a therapist the next week.
Wow.
Yeah, and began the healing process because, again, I don't want to become the thing. And that's what, helps me with my relationship with Lair is like, I never wanted that. But also, being a clinician or a practitioner, it's so reciprocal. There's so much reciprocity. You draw clients to you that are working through the things that you're working through. You learn so much about like life and humanity, and you feel more human when you witness other people in their humanity. And that's so healing to see that like, oh, I'm not a weirdo. I'm not like, I'm just going through this human life. And, client after client is reporting this or that. And while I don't want them to suffer, but you just see that like suffering is a thing that we all experience. And while the details may be different, there's so much we share in common. And you just understand like life is life and it's beautiful and hard. And so I think the work has served me in that way and in such an incredible way. Like my clients have been the most beautiful teachers.
So for me, I remember laying on the couch at like 19, and it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was just watching whatever was on, just commercials.
What was it? Sorry, I didn't hear you, Lair.
Infomercials. I was watching an infomercial, and it was, of course, Tony Robbins. That's the one that was on all the time.
Oh,
yeah. And so this is what sparked my interest, to be honest. I woke my mom up and got her credit card, and I purchased the whatever he was selling at the time. And as silly as that may sound, it like sparked this interest in self-awareness and in how my brain works. And then I could not stop. And I remember I was with this girl, and we had been together for like 4 years at this point. And I was discovering all these really amazing aspects of myself and of psychology and of self-help and all of that. And I was sharing this with her. We were on a hike. And she turned to me at one point, and I probably had been sharing too many of these amazing ideas because I get excited. And she turned to me and she said, "Does it really have to be this complicated? I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be that complicated." And I went, "Oh, I think we're done."
Exactly. Because if I can't talk to you about all these learnings and all this inspiration and like, where I'm at, we're not on the same page, right?
Yeah.
We're not on the same, because you are on this trajectory and you're like, I'm going for it. That resonates, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
And as I moved to New York to become an actor and did all of that, and my therapist at the time kept saying, "This acting thing's going, it's going, it's going. I mean, right? But I think you'd be a really good therapist. I mean, your interests seem like they're kind of aligned with this." And I was reading this book by a woman named Barbara Sher. And she said, if you want to know what to do with your life, look no further than your bookshelf. It's there. It may not be on the...
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It may not be on the
spine. I've never heard that before either. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's in there. Because this is the thing you read and are drawn to when no one's paying, when no one's pushing you, right? This is what you're drawn to.
What are you watching? What are you reading?
Yeah. So I turned as I read this in my little apartment in New York, and I looked at my bookshelf, and it was on the spines. There was like 4 books on acting. There was like 30 books on self-help, on the brain and therapy and all of that. And so I was like, that's a really inconvenient truth.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Oh man, I got to go back to school. I thought acting was my life. Ooh.
Right. Well, I mean, look, that's that external validation, right? That's the outsourcing of my self-worth. That's the, I need this to tell me that I'm enough. If I could put my big face up on the movie screen and you have to pay a bunch of money to come see me, then of course I must be enough, right? And I had to deal with that part of my ego. I had to reconcile that within myself. So it wasn't just like, let's go find a program.
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah.
It's like an existential crisis.
Oh, it was brutal.
You're like, oh God, this is what's happening. And you kind of know your soul's like, yep, that's right, Lair. It's kind of a wink, but it's not a wink. It's like, ooh. Yeah. Then you're like, it feels really good to actually think about that. But all of the other stuff, it's like, oh no, I have to turn my back on all those dreams, that other stuff, which is really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also tell this other silly story. I may have told it before here, but I was sitting in my trailer on Law and Order, and I had I just come from hair and makeup, and I had my own trailer and all this. And I'm like kind of feeling my oats, and I just done this pilot for ABC with Kira Sedgwick and Beverly D'Angelo. My career was kind of hopping a little bit. And so I'm sitting there and I'm reading one of my books, and I know it's going to sound a little crazy as I say this, but it was almost audibly in my head. This voice said, this is all a bunch of crap, right?
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, oh no. And it was like, yeah, you can keep doing this all you want. You can keep banging your head against, but you know where you need to be. You know what you need to do. And you're just prolonging the inevitable. And
Lair.
That particular point that I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to figure it out. And so I did. And
I love that. I think that I've had so many times in my life when God's talking directly to me. It's just like it's like the clear audible in my head going, this is it, or this, you know what I mean? The message is so darn clear that I'm like, you can't ignore it. Like, it's just like, holy macaroni.
Well, when the universe resorts to actually audibly speaking in your ear, you've waited this way too long.
It's true. Let's take a quick break. This show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Something I've heard over and over again, both in my own life and in the conversations we've had on this show, is that asking for help can feel like admitting defeat. Like somehow if you need support, it means something's wrong with you. I just want to push back on that because I don't believe in that for 1 second. I'm actually somebody that is an advocate for asking for help. Going to therapy does not mean that you're falling apart. It means that you're paying attention. It means you care enough about yourself and the people you love to actually show up for that process. BetterHelp is online therapy that makes it genuinely simple to get started. You get matched with a licensed therapist based on what you're working through, and you can meet with them by phone, on video, or even through messaging, on your own schedule, wherever you are. If you've been curious about therapy, now is a good time. Visit betterhelp.com/loveready to get 10% off. That's BetterHelp.com/loveready. You mentioned protector parts. Okay, it's in your book. You talked about it at In Bloom, both of you. The parts of us that come forward to defend our wounds, to defend these parts of us that have been so hurt when we were growing up, right? We have wounds. So what is the difference between fighting for something and fighting about something? Like maybe you're fighting your protector mode's right in there and it's all about defense. Are you fighting for something or fighting about something? You know what I mean?
Right. So do you want to take this, Ash?
Sure.
So when you're fighting, I always like to picture of this water line, right? And there's above the water line is our egos and our protector parts, and where we are fighting about, we might be fighting about where we're having dinner or, what we're going to do with the money or the sex. This is not unimportant stuff. But below the water line is what we're fighting for. And that's where I think the soul kind of gets involved. And again, those things on the surface, those things in your ego that you're fighting about, they're not unimportant. So they can definitely get your attention very quickly. But when we pull on that cord a little bit and we go below the water line, that thing about, we're fighting about where we're going to have dinner actually is you fighting for, do I matter, as an example, or am I loved here, right? And so when we pull on that cord and we look a little bit further below the surface and we ask the question, what am I fighting for here? Am I fighting to know that I'm loved, to know that I'm safe, to know that I'm enough, to know that I matter? When we feel the exposure of those core wounds, you can bet very, very quickly our protector parts are going to come up and try to take care of the younger parts that have been wounded, to try to, it's for a very good reason, to stave off any further wounding. The problem is when we get caught up in the ego, we get caught up on the surface, we can stay there. And if you're a therapist who has dealt with that at any level with clients, that's the Wimbledon match about who said what to who when. What I want to know
the
is
details, right? Like what happened? He said this and she said that, but then this happened and that, it's just right.
They turn to me and they're like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I wasn't there. What I know is there are two people in the room, one of whom I think does not feel like she matters. And this other person in the room feels like he's unsafe or some version of that. And so when I can get people talking about that, this is when real growth and connection can happen. If we can get beyond the ego and down into those aspects that we're really talking about. And this is not easy. I've written a book about it. I've learned all kinds of stuff. Listen, I still have a hard time with it. When she's there looking at me like, dude, when are you going to, you're fighting about something. What are you fighting for? And it's just like, I don't feel safe, or I don't feel lovable. Who wants to say that? Nobody wants to say
like that. I'm going to feel like that's so, and maybe some people don't even understand what they're fighting for. Right.
Well, I don't understand the difference. And this is why we have jobs.
Right. What do you think, Ash?
I think it always starts, you're fighting about something, but it's really, you're fighting for something, whatever that is, it's anything. It could be any of the things he mentioned. But when it becomes a fight, when it becomes a heated argument, that it's actually something you're fighting for, and like, for me, if it's something, it's like, for me, is safety, or am I enough, and if he says something, I can feel it in my body that he could not mean it the way it's coming across, but there's always a hypervigilant part of me that's scanning for when he becomes like everyone else. And it's gotten quieter, and it's so, I don't love that for him. But if it's like a tone or words, it like lights something in my body, and it's like, there it is. Then we have to kind of walk it back and like see what's really happening there. But yeah, I mean, it's those things live inside of us.
I love that reminder that you just gave us around, like, you've been together 25 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time. 26.
25
and you're both helping people with relationships and therapy and, counseling, and like, holy moly, you still struggle. And this is just the reality of life.
Just the reality of life.
I think about even just how my parenting sometimes, I'm like, oh, major trigger. What the heck? It's a lifelong journey that we're in. We're all on. So keep it practicing, right?
Yeah. We get to this place, I think, of like this working stage of, I think we've gotten past the idea that like either of us is suddenly going to become a different person or leave. And so there is the safety, I think, container of this relationship to work things out. And so it's not perfect, it's not pristine, and it's not always placid waters. But at least for me, and I'll speak for myself, that I feel like we can work within the container of this thing, and that feels incredibly safe. Like I know that, like, by and large, I'm not going to say something that's going to blow her out of the relationship.
Right. You've built a safe container.
Yeah, that safe container is really precious.
So, what does it mean for a man to feel like he's not enough? And what's usually underneath that feeling?
Well, I might retool that a little bit. I would say that's the thing that is underneath the surface of most things. And those things that men are typically fighting about are the symptoms. We'll see hypermasculinity as an example. You ever see that? Not enough. Little boy under there, guaranteed. I'll be sitting with a couple, and I'll speak in sort of, I guess, heteronormative terms. It's a man and a woman. And I will trot out my 4. Am I loved? Am I safe? Am I enough? Do I matter? And typically I will see the woman hitch, and she'll go and she'll tell me what hers are. Maybe it's 1, 2, or 3 of those. She'll like, yes, it's that. And then invariably she'll go, I have no idea what his are, and neither does he. Right. And you see the guy going, yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. And I'll look at him and I'll go, I've known you 15 minutes and I already know what yours is. You're never enough. And you just see him go,
and so how are you calling that out in 15 minutes? What are you seeing? What are you observing, hearing?
Well, I mean, look, when you say, I'm going to ask you guys some questions, and I just want you to feel them. I don't want you to think about it as best you can. I just want you to feel into it. And I'll say, are you loved? Are you safe? Are you enough? Did you matter? And you'll watch people hitch. You'll watch the eyes get kind of shrink wrapped in tears. You'll get a little verklempt, right? Because you hit the truth button. But he's over there has no idea until I say it out loud again, like, you are never enough. And I said, the pile of money's never big enough. The car's not nice enough. The job's not good enough because you're not enough. And invariably they will say, that's it. And it goes back to what I said I said it in Bloom on our second day. Again, I don't know that this is actually true. But when I said this out loud on stage that day, every male head in the audience was going like this. I said, unconditional love is reserved for women, children, and dogs. Men are loved for what they can provide. And that notion is always in question. Am I good enough? Am I enough? That's a Chris Rock quote, by the way. So.
It's sad. When I hear that, it's just so sad, you know? That it's the experience of so many boys and men.
Right. And as I talk about it, wearing the uniform that I'm currently wearing of the cisgendered white male, it's like, you also will get a lot of people saying, oh, and here comes your male fragility. And so my question is like, okay, so when are we supposed to talk about this? Right. When are we supposed to talk about like vulnerability? We're already taught that vulnerability is synonymous with weakness. One of the biggest fears we have is if I show you my vulnerability, it's going to be emasculating. It's not going to be sexy, right? And so you see the backlash of that reaction is, and you see this in, I don't know if you saw Inside the Manosphere. You see a lot of these kids. Oh
man, what a movie. Oof.
I mean, right? Yeah. You see a lot of these young men sort of gravitating towards that hypermasculinity because I don't want to be seen as being weak. How do I discuss my vulnerability? How do I discuss the fact that our culture has taught us to outsource our validation to everything else other than our own intrinsic goodness?
Yeah.
And so how do I bring them back to that?
Right.
And every single one of those guys had a father wound.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was fascinating to watch the documentarian, the man. Mm-hmm. They wanted to push him away, but they kept letting him in, and they each had a father wound.
Because he was showing up so gently and openly.
And watching.
Mm-hmm.
Curious.
He was asking them questions and giving them care and attention. I was so blown away by how he was treating those boys because they're boys, you know.
Yeah.
They're living out these 10-year-olds as 25, whatever. It's like, no, that's a 10-year-old you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah, and all of them have that wound of if I were enough, he would have stayed.
Oh wow, incredible. And I also was thinking about when you were talking, Lair, about people in the office or just like in relationship. It's like if a man starts to practice being vulnerable, is that relationship safe? Is that woman or that partner safe enough to share in that, like to hold it? To reflect it and to be like, I like this side of you. I want this side of you, because I imagine there's a lot of partners that don't want it. Like they want the strong. They want the, you know what I mean? They say, I want you to I want to be able to talk to you without you blowing up every time. But then again, do I really want to see that softer side of you?
I will have the women in my practice will say, yeah, I mean, not exactly the sexiest thing in the world. And I'm like,
right? Yeah.
You're realized.
What do women often misunderstand about this worthiness wound in men? Ash, what do you think?
Ooh. I was thinking Lair would probably be better. What do they misunderstand about the not enoughness?
Or maybe we can, yes, I'll ask you, what do men often misunderstand about it in themselves? Right? Like,
well, I guess it's so masked in the hypermasculinity or in the workaholic, the working a lot or providing or money or, I think it's so easy to forget. I've worked with a lot of men over the years and every one of them is sensitive. Mm-hmm. Every one of them has a tender heart underneath all of it. And I think women forget that it's like all of that is a symptom of a culture that and familial and culture that asks them to be something other than they are. And having two boys, oh my God, my boys are just so beautifully sensitive. Like you really recognize like what happened to these people. And usually the ones that are the most outwardly misogynistic, outwardly hypermasculine are the most sensitive, are the most tenderhearted. And it's come to express itself that way. So I think we can so easily forget that there's like a little boy in there, like you said.
Those men will often learn to hate that version of themselves, and they will try as best they can to excommunicate that version of themselves out. Right. And so that's the place where we can get very Jungian on this, where that part goes into shadow and then starts trying to express itself in all sorts of unhealthy ways. That they will hate that version of themselves. They will call it weakness, and they'll use other pejorative terms that I won't use right now to talk about themselves in that way. I've worked in men's anger management. I've been an angry man in my life, and I call myself a recovering angry man all the time. And that's true. When you have that version of yourself, again, to Ash's point, our culture teaches this. And so helping them sort of tease that out and uncouple that sweet little boy inside of them that's still there with like, well, yeah, I hate that version. They will say it out loud. I fucking hate that version.
Wow.
On a second. No, we have to learn to love that version of ourselves.
So, Larry, you said something that I wanted to ask about around the dark side, the shadow work, right? That people are let's just talk about men, for instance. Like, what kind of behaviors, if they've just like, no, that part of me is not part of me. That sensitive, loving, tender boy that I was and it was not recognized for, never got to play out. If it's in the dark and they're doing secret shit and dark stuff, what kind of behaviors does that look like?
Well, when you hate that version of yourself, right, then you'll hate whatever looks like that out in the world, right? And so if they see vulnerability or they detect something that looks like weakness, they're going to try to they'll hurt it, they'll disparage it, they'll treat it horribly, and so it can come out like that, or it can come out in that all of the hyper activities, whether it's like I'm trying to amass as much money as I could possibly have so that I can be better than everybody else. I'll try to be bigger physically. It can come out sexually, where they're not exactly kind lovers, we'll say, as that sort of hyper masculinity finds its way out in that way.
Wow.
Big topic.
I know it is. So let's talk about what healing actually looks like in a relationship. Okay, personal healing and relationship. What do people often misunderstand about healing and relationship? Like, I think one of the first things is like, I got to be healed. I'm single, so I'm going to take all this time and I'm going to work on my healing, and then I'm going to be great in this relationship. But also, just like, tell me about the myths around healing and relationship.
I think it's a myth that you're going to do all the healing on your own. I think it's in relationship that we heal the most, whether it's friendships, familial relationships, romantic partnerships. I mean, there's obviously stuff you can do on your own, but it's when we're in that container and a version of us is being reflected back to us that we learn the most, or we're interacting, with someone so intimately that we learn so much about ourselves, and we see the parts of us that come up, and we see how we really feel about ourselves when we're reflected back, or we see how we act when we're with another person. I mean, it's definitely like a clearer picture and more honest. I think it's hard to know. I mean, it's kind of like trying to play a sport, but not really getting, like, I can try to practice surfing, but I have to get in the ocean, to know how I surf.
Yes.
And I feel like the word, I know people say this a lot about healing, and I've thought about this a lot. Like, we do healing, but then the idea of healing keeps us in a perpetual state of healing. And when we think of life as the practice, or relationship as a practice, or we're living, if we have if we have like a holistic engagement with that relationship with life, like mind, body, spirit, if we're paying attention to those different places, then we're always learning. And I think that's really like, I would say at some point we go from healing to accepting that life is about evolving and learning. Because then I think it's a little softer, a little more gentle. It's a less pressure.
Yeah. I would say that I said this out loud to myself, and I'm sure it was other people heard me. I was like, I am done healing. And I don't mean like forever and ever, amen. But I mean like, come on, Robin. I mean, I do this for a living. Like I'm speaking to amazing people that are just like, that have taught me so much. And then I'm practicing it in my life. I'm like, okay, that is healed. Like that childhood stuff, no, it doesn't affect me anymore. Like it really, I'm there because I'm 48, almost 49 years old. And I'm like, oh man, the healing I've done. Oh, right. Mm-hmm. I'm doing the work still. That doesn't mean I'm not doing the work on myself. And I'm not like constantly, growing and learning. Right. That is going to be the rest of my life. And if stuff comes up, oh man, I got to heal that. Whew, that one hurt bad. That is a big wound. Holy moly. Like I fell just 2 weeks ago and I hurt myself really bad. My knee is like very, very badly hurt. And my foot on the other leg is very badly hurt. And so I'm tending to my wounds, for real wounding. My mom just died. I mean, this is a wound that I'm dealing with right now and it's deep. So like we're being realistic about where life is at. I'm being realistic about it. Like I'm in wound, I'm in healing and no bones about it, And that doesn't mean that my whole life has to be about healing. And I love that you really made that differentiation, Ashley. I appreciate that.
Well, I think what you're healing from the loss of your mother, and that's like something you've never experienced before, but you're not walking around this open wound. Like it doesn't leave room for us to be human if we're constantly saying like, I need to heal before I can. And like you said, you're tending to a wound right now, both physical and emotional. And also I'm sorry for your loss. That's a lot to work through. That's a lot of grief. And then the physical pain of moving through both.
Yeah.
Life is...
But it's making me slow down.
That's what I was going to say. Injury. Life has probably said, let's slow down and walk through these things.
And I'm doing it. I'm grieving. And I'm really honoring my mother. We have an altar that I created after we got home from our celebration. And every morning we light the candle and my mom's, we're honoring her the whole way through. Lovely. And it's just so beautiful. And it is very healing for all of us, So there's so much beauty in our journey.
Yeah, I think when you get to the place where you've gotten in your healing journey, it's like it's not that those things that suddenly you're immune to your passing of your mother. Of course, that's to unzip some of those wounds. It's now you are fortified with the work that sits behind you, and you have all this to reach for, right? You have all of this arsenal of things, these practices, these things that you've learned and that you've done. It doesn't make the pain go away or again make you immune to it. Your ability to metabolize that pain and that loss a little more streamlined, perhaps. You're a little more aware of your wounds, so perhaps you're not reacting through it. You're able to sit and talk about it.
Totally. Yeah, I'm equipped, and I'm doing it in the best way that I know, and it's working.
As skillfully as one can. Yeah.
Very skillfully, very intentionally.
Because life never plateaus. You don't just reach a point where you're like just coasting, and that's the thing. You've learned to be with life as it arises.
Yeah, exactly. So, what has your relationship taught you about love?
Well, I mean, everything, because I didn't know anything about love before.
Well,
I mean, seriously, like, when we grow up like that, we think, oh, that's love. I don't really want anything to do with love. I thought love was kind of gross. That's what it looked like.
Exactly. You're like, I don't want any of that.
No. So, I mean, it taught me everything.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Ashley.
Yeah.
There's a scene from Pretty Woman, for those of you who remember the movie, and it's the very end where he's climbing up the scaffolding to come and rescue her. And and she rescued him right back.
Oh, I love that. Yes, I
Yeah.
remember, of course, the end.
Yeah.
That's
My God, I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah, I
rescue
mean,
you
love
right back.
It's so beautiful. It's so generous and present and curious and loyal. Love is loyal and honest.
Yes, it
Loyal,
is.
honest,
It's loyal
present,
and
generous.
honest.
It's not, I mean, love, how do you say it? Like
It's
relationships aren't perfect, but love is perfect. And, it's interesting to say that.
Also
there's a
inconvenient.
whole, inconvenient. Did you say, Lair?
Yeah, it's really inconvenient, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's because I always say love is kind of the bitch of the bunch, right? It's built up as this like, oh, puppy dogs and rainbows. It's not.
Mm-mm.
Puppy dogs
It
and
sure
rainbows
isn't.
might be the aspect or the symptomatic aspect of loving well and learning the lessons that love will present to you. But love asks more of us. It's not about rom-com moments necessarily. It's asking you to dig into yourself and find the wounds that are there, the things that need healing, the parts of you that nobody claps for, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what love is really digging into you for. And that's the thing I think that we've done here is we've created a container between the two of us over the course of the last 25, 26 years that where we can do that work and we can be imperfect and we can go, hey, don't love that. And I see that you're hurting. So let's talk about that. Right. That's the inconvenience of love right there. Right. Like it's not going to be, warm and fuzzy in this moment. It's going to be a little rough, but love would say you stick. Love would say you stand in there and you help your partner and yourself through that.
When love shows you things about yourself that you need to see, and that's inconvenient,
That's right. Yep. Just as we love our children unconditionally, it's just like when we can give that to our partner, give that to ourselves, what a new level. And how does that show up? You know what I mean?
It doesn't always mean you stay, but
no, Lair. I'm not talking about staying in. Absolutely not. No.
Sometimes loving someone is saying bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, I need to love myself, right? Like I actually need to love myself, and in doing so, I can love you enough to say, I'm going to have to not do this with you any longer. And that's again where love becomes really inconvenient.
I think that we have two more questions. I think that we've already covered it, but I want to hear your answers. What is the one myth about love that we collectively need to unlearn?
I think I did already answer mine. It's that love is rom-com moments, puppy dogs and rainbows, and all the things that it's built up in Hollywood. It's not.
Mm-mm.
For me, the reasons, like the things that I'm gonna boast about us a little bit. So give me a second. Sometimes people have asked us in one way or another in our social lives, like, is this real? I mean, seriously, I mean, right? The way you look at each other, is that real? And I can say that it is. And it's not because we shot for that. We weren't shooting for that. We were shooting for self-healing and trying to help each other be the best versions of ourselves that we can be, right? The byproduct of that work on ourselves and with each other has been the gazing eyes and the rom-com moments and the great sex and all the things over the course of quarter century. That's all lasted because what are you laughing about?
The quarter century. Whoa,
it's great. I love it.
But, right. It's been a long time. I mean, we know people have been together longer, but like, I didn't know that you could do this. I didn't know it could stay so connected, so loving, so vibrant. And so I can tell people, yeah, it is, but probably not for the reasons you think.
Yes, Lair.
It's ironic as you're talking, you have such mixed messages in media. You have like a culture that like says it believes like love saves everything, but it has movies, books, dramas that show that love doesn't last, that it's not loyal, that it's not connective, that it's not sexy, that it's not passionate, and so it's like, it's pretending to be one thing, but it's saying another. And it's very confusing. And I think what I would say that's I mean, I think one of the myths is that love in a long-term relationship gets boring and dull. And I just think that's just not true. I think it can be, it's just incredibly enlivening and exciting. I mean, if that's your thing, if monogamy is your thing and long-term relationship is your thing, it can be incredibly beautiful. So, but this idea that it's like, bleh, I'm like, that's a myth. Yeah, you make it that. If you want same old, you're going to get same old.
Well, I think when you're lazy, that's what, right?
Yep. Love requires work. It takes responsibility. Requires a lot of courage.
Well, I always say you should be able to list how you love your partner on your resume under special skills. Like, I'm that good at it. I'm so good at that. Yeah. And you don't get to be the one who gives that Yelp ad. You got to make sure that they're on board with what you're saying. I think you are. Do you agree with this? I love that.
Absolutely.
List that under special skills. Like, I'm that good at loving that person. And you should be proud of that.
Absolutely. So the last question is, what is love?
It's so complicated. It's not an easy answer.
It's what you do. Love is a conveyance.
Love is a what, buddy?
Conveyance.
Conveyance?
Right? Yeah, it's a conveyance. It's a verb. It's not what you necessarily feel, right? So I'll have people in my office who are like, I'm watching them and I've asked this question a few times. I'm like, do you love your partner? And they look at me as though I'm sort of being ridiculous. Like, yeah, why wouldn't it be? I'm like, well, how would they know that? And they'll say, well, because they have all these warm thoughts and feelings. Like, why are you? I'm like, well, that's great for you, isn't it? Because unless you're doing and saying and acting in a way that would actually convey those feelings, that's all just for you. So love is an action. Love is what you do. Love is the conveyance of the feelings that you're having for this person in a way that shows up within them as like, oh, wow, look at that. I'm being loved now. Right? And it speaks directly to those. You have to know, this is attunement. I talk about attunement in the book, right? Attuning to your partners so that you know, not their love language, because that's transactional. Don't get me wrong. I wish I'd written that book. It's the residuals must be amazing. It's, are you loved? Are you safe? Are you enough? Do you matter to me? When I convey those things to her, like your safety in this relationship, because that's a big one for her. Like, I have to be on it.
That's my first priority, right? Because you know that's like, you have to make sure that she's feeling safe, and you're going to show her that in all the ways in your life, in your relationship.
And being interested enough to know that is also the conveyance of my love for her.
Definitely. Ashley?
I'm going to get a little spiritual for a moment, but
yes, please.
It's for him. I love what he said is like that. I support that completely, that the expression of that. And love to me is the embodiment of our truest nature. It's of our essence. And when we're it's the soul's language, it's the energy of the soul. And when we're coming from that place, I said this before, like, we don't need a modality. We don't need to defend or protect, because we can express what's true from a place that like ego doesn't need to participate. And so if we drop into that space and we embody that, then to me, relationship is much easier. Now, is it easy to get there? Is it easy to remember that that's there? No. I mean, we're designed to forget, unfortunately. But when we can, all the answers we need come from that space.
Absolutely. True. It's 12-12. That's beautiful. I want to thank you with my whole self and my whole heart. This has been such a delight. And just, I love talking to you and learning from you both and just being your friend. And I know this, there's so many gems in our conversation that people will take away into their lives and make their lives better, their relationships better. That's why we're here. So thank you both so much.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for having us.
I hope you have the best day ever. The Real Love Ready series is a Soul Print Media production, presented by BetterHelp, hosted by me, Robin Ducharme. Executive producers, Robin Ducharme, John Kim, Tara Malhotra Feinberg, Hilary Swanson. Senior producer, Miriam Debbie Talbot. Producers, Tara Malhotra Feinberg and Maya Anstey. Directed by Miriam Debbie Talbot. Edited by Susie Landers O'Connell. Production coordinator, Leah Schultz. Post sound mixing, Christian Deutsch.